Hi, I think we're having a couple of technical issues. Do you want to just ping me, Mark, to say that we're live and happy to go? Or anybody in the comments, actually. Okay, great. Hi, everyone. Sorry about that. So my name is Niall Carter. I'm presenting to you. Really excited to be here as part of Smarter Working Live. What I wanted to talk to you today was about connected experiences. The reason I wanted to talk about connected experiences is I wanted to put a position to you to talk about how to engage your employees and your citizens in the same way. How we can start to bring the consumerization of work together to the benefit of the citizens that we all serve. So we'll take about 15-20 minutes. I'd love to hear your feedback and any comments you have in the thread. So please do let me know. So what I want to talk about just today is, I hear a lot in my job. I hear a lot about organizations that want to consider their employees very separately to how they engage their citizens. So working for RingCentral, we provide business communications across frontline workers, so traditionally contact center, but also employees, around message, telephony, and video messages. So what we want to try and do is simplify that together and provide the same platform that you use in your citizens, but also in your employees as well, to bring this one connected experience. So when we go on to think about this, traditionally what we'll do is we'll think about employee engagement. So this would be traditional telephony, messaging, and also video meetings. But then also think about citizen engagement sometimes separately. So you might have traditional contact center, you might have some digital channels that you want to engage your citizens on. Might be more AI driven and more futuristic methods and channels of communication. But really, actually, we're going to get efficiency, we're going to get greater first call resolution, and we're going to be able to get a greater experience for your staff, your employees, and your citizens if we can bring these together into one platform. Why? Well, the reason why is you're going to have one group of people all facing into the same queries. So from an efficiency point of view, you're going to have less people being able to do more or at higher quality, but also more importantly, you're going to be able to have different channels or different channels of communication that's more appropriate for the different use cases that you might be providing to the people taking your service. So the examples I'll talk about here might be using the example of a local council that have a transactional way of recording fly tipping or graffiti maybe, right through to an example like HMRC, where you're going to want to call in about your taxes and have a personal and professional organization using a different channel, telephone versus digital, and also a different environment, one that might be out on your mobile versus one that might be at your desk using a traditional bit of plastic on your desk, or even through a web browser using a soft phone. So you've got different channels of engaging people, but then you've also got different modalities. So by channels, I'm talking about calling, messaging, meeting, inbound contact center, digital, and then modalities, I'm talking about browsers, tablets, phones, desktop, laptops, and all of this is aimed to bring together into one platform to allow you to provide out that service and create these connected experiences. So to do that, what I want to do is I kind of want to go back a little bit, and I want to talk about COVID, really because it's a good example of an acceleration. And the COVID period was a great many things, but it was a really nice way of accelerating and making it very easy to see these different changes and modalities. So when this first happened and everyone started facing lockdown, everybody went into crisis mode. Everyone went into this pandemic panic of buying. And as a vendor, I would speak to organizations, I'll bring up existing customers or prospects, and they'd say to me that, Niall, unless you can give me a web camera or you can give me a laptop, I'm just not interested, because I'm in full crisis mode, taking the status quo of the way that these organizations would be communicating and collaborating both internally and externally, which have been very stable for many years. and they've completely turned it on its head. Everyone's now having to work at home, and they're having to just pivot really quickly. So this acceleration has happened literally probably over about a 4-week period. So you have that absolute crisis mode. And then you get into, I mentioned this phrase, pandemic panic buying, right? And this is all about, okay, I've got my staff at home. That's good. I'm starting to understand now what I need to do to allow them to have the same level of service provision out to our citizens. So that's where you start getting this pandemic panic. You're saying, okay, I've got my laptop and my web camera, but now I can't communicate. I can't, how do I have that face-to-face office contact? Or how do I maintain the council hotlines for missed bins or something like that? So, the natural place here is to go to a cloud provider. We've all heard about how Zoom has become the darling of COVID. And that's a really good example of this sort of pandemic panic buy, because suddenly you've gone crisis mode, got everyone at home. Now what we're starting to do is understand we need to do something, because this is probably going to last for 1 to 3 years. But then what COVID did as well is it really accelerated that business strategy redefinition. So this has been going on for a number of years, where people are recognizing, with the younger generations of workers coming in particularly, recognizing that the way of working is changing, but then also the expectations that people have of your organizations, effectively your customers in the public sector, the citizens, those expectations are changing as well. So there's been absolute awareness of this, and this business strategy redefinition has been known for quite some time. But what COVID did was massively accelerate that. So we went crisis mode, give me a laptop and a web camera, through to this pandemic panic buying to get us over the 1 to 3 years. But now we've really accelerated understanding what it is that we need to do going forward. And that's that business strategy redefinition. So that's about understanding who's got the ability to communicate at the right time over the right channels, who's supporting the different modalities of communication, and then also how can you fuse that left-hand side of the brain of employee engagement to the right-hand side of the brain around citizen engagement to provide that simpler communications and collaboration sort of brain to your operation. And ultimately, what resulted was, in a hybrid world, the productivity moves the employee. And I want to give an example of this, just do a simple infographic, right? And actually, this is really relevant to my day today. So I actually literally woke up this morning to my 10-year-old telling me that I needed to make him pancakes because it's Shrove Tuesday. So I went downstairs, boiled the kettle as I do every morning. And that's when I first started interacting with the digital world. So I always do 3 things. First thing I do when the kettle boils, I look at BBC News headlines, then I look at the sports headlines, then I just check into my work messages just to give a sense of what my day is going to look like. So that's on a phone, in my kitchen, in my slippers, waiting to cook pancakes for my 3 kids. Okay, that will then go away while I do the school run. And then I'll come back from that and I'll walk my dog along the towpath. I live in Oxford, so the towpath along the River Thames. And that's what I'll next interact as a citizen with the Vale of Whitehorse Council, which is where I'll see some fly tipping. So I live near a famous fly tip spot. And I'll interact with the Vale of Whitehorse on my phone by reporting fly tipping on their website. So again, this is the channel is digital because it's very transactional. The modality is phone, because if you think conversely, what I'm not going to do is go home, pick up my old house phone, for example, call a hotline and say, right, it's underneath the A404 in Oxford, there's a mattress and a washing machine there. Vale of Whitehorse have chosen a digital channel over the mobile to allow that transactional setting. But then likewise, as I go through my day, I'll use the example of HMRC. As a citizen, again, I might choose in my home office to make a telephone call to them to discuss taxes, because actually I don't want to do that over a web chat. I don't want to do that over email because the context will be lost. That's something I want to have that trusted relationship with. As I go through my day, again, I'm in my home office, that's when I'll start engaging over emails and meetings, team messaging and telephone. It could be that I go and pick up kids or I go for a run. And again, my location changes. So my modality changes, right? But then also the channel with which I communicate and collaborate changes. So through my day, I've got lots of different locations, lots of different devices, and lots of different channels of communicating both with my staff, my colleagues, but then also as a citizen or as a customer of the organizations that serve me too. And really, it's about understanding the expectations that you have as an employee and as a customer or citizen, because as service providers, you need to think of those two halves of the brain and come up with a simplified platform to allow efficiency across both. So I think that's how to start, how we can all start thinking about providing simpler communications, better experience. But I also want to talk a little bit about, from a personal experience as a vendor, how to sort of almost get there. Because I think it's correct, but I think it's very easy to say, right, I'm going to race towards digital. My vision statement is call deflection, conversational AI. I'm going to have a chat GPT bot that sits on my website somewhere that'll answer everything and make everything a cup of tea and replace everybody. And that might be a vision that's correct for some channels, but also what's important is understanding that pyramid to get there. Because actually, if you rewind 10 or 15 years, the primary method of communication and collaboration was around face-to-face. So, when I started my kind of homeowners or rental career, I used to go into Aylesbury District Council and I'd have that face-to-face engagement. Now, that was great from a trust point of view. It was sometimes challenging from an accessibility point of view. But then later, working with ABDC, I realised the cost as well. So the cost of that was about £7.40 something per transaction. So it wasn't as accessible, maybe, as some people wanted, because I had to take time out of my day to do that. It wasn't necessarily as effective from a monetary point of view to allow scale, but it was very good for trust. And what's really important there is you can really understand what people need to talk about and the way they want to talk about it. So you learn from that until you go into the next level up, which can be more transactional, which is voice. So typically, cost per transaction would be somewhere in the region of £2.30 per transaction. So again, you think about it's a bit more accessible because people don't need to leave their office or their home or their place of work. They can do it between dropping kids to school or whatever it might be. You're also changing and offering up a different modality. People can use phones to do this rather than needing to walk and go in person. But you're still retaining that personal and trusted environment. And then taking the learnings from that and making that the appropriate channel, then you can go into the digital space. But again, it's about understanding that being the right channel and also understanding the modality that you can serve that through. So I use the example of myself on a dog walk reporting fly tipping. That's a very transactional interaction that I have. And therefore, I don't actually want to talk to anybody on that. It's literally a pin on a map, report something. But the important thing to me as a citizen there is that I can do it right there and right then. I'm not reliant to have to drop down the level to that voice, go home, call in the district council to be able to then report that. So it's really, really about understanding that pyramid as you go up, because it's very, very hard to start at digital and go straight in there. Because if you go in there, then it's sometimes very difficult to understand the value that the other channels of communication might have to your organization and your customers. So if I just take each one of these very briefly in turn, just from a phone point of view, very simple. People still trust when it comes to external communication. People still trust phone calls or voice calls for external communications. So there's a proliferation of Teams or other video and instant messaging devices in the workplace. But actually, when it comes to external, there's still the largest channel of communication is still telephony, and that's because of the trust that people have within that. So when I go back to that COVID, that pandemic panic, there's still absolutely that really important place, that bedrock of communication in voice calls, because that is a trusted layer that allows you to increase accessibility, lower costs, but also provide that customer service, that citizen engagement, which is so important. But you need to offer that channel, but the modality is changing. So we all need to be cognizant of the fact that people probably don't have phones on their wall anymore or on their dressers. People have mobile phones. People are becoming increasingly confident in using web-based soft phones. So we all need to be thinking about and finding a platform that allows that different sort of modality. And the reason for that is, think about the consumerization of work. So, I don't know, 20 years ago, you'd go into work and you had the best sort of technology. When I started, I went in to get a great laptop with a new Apple iPhone, and that was the bee's knees. Now, I use my own devices at work because as a consumer, I have better devices than my company will give me, but also my expectations are higher as a consumer than as an employee. So you've got this really interesting space where, as employees, you want the WhatsApp style team-based messaging. You want to be able to elevate to a video call really quickly. You want to be able to use desktop, web, mobile, all at once. And you have that expectation both as an employee, but then also as a customer or a citizen, because it comes from your space as a consumer. So it's that consumerization of work is driving that demand. And that's why this employee engagement and citizen engagement really needs to be thought about in the same way. So importantly, that voice layer, phone is important around that trusted space. So if we accept that as a channel that we need to provide, we need to think about how we can provide that modality. This goes back to having a service that allows it on a desktop, web, mobile, app, whatever it might be. So that important future of telephony, that is going to be omnipresent. I made the comment about the dog walk or going out to the supermarket. It's got to be intelligent. It's got to be composable, because that's what allows you to offer that service on any device. And it's got to be contextual. So you've got to be able to get information and knowledge from the people calling in. But then how can we just think about, just sticking on this voice bit, how can we think about actually making that more modern? Because it's not just a telephone call, right? You got to think about how you can feed it into your wider environment. And this is really where it comes into elevating it up into the video space as well, but then also providing greater functionality around that voice. And also, more importantly, you need to be able to think about how you got that voice path or telephone integrating into your existing environment. So going back to the example of COVID accelerating everything, what we're seeing is a lot of people ending up on Teams. But then also, as that kind of shift to cloud and shift in that strategic transformation has quickened, people are more comfortable using internet-based technologies. So, for example, you might have Teams as your internal communication. You might have Google Drive or OneDrive for your file storage. You might have a CRM like Graticus or Salesforce. And really what you need to do is make sure that you've got whatever system you choose, make sure that you can augment those technology choices. Because again, we're not, go back even just 5 years, we're not on a traditional on-premises technology stack where we're all in the same office. We have to allow for the fact that we're now spread all over in a hybrid world, working in the kitchen, the supermarket, doing kids drop off. And so you need to be able to have this integration into your working life and the technology ecosystem. And then finally, once you've gone through that understanding, then you can start to look at the digital modality. So these are, absolutely, I mentioned earlier, typically more transactional, but lower cost, lower value. That's not to say at all by lower value, that they're diminished in any way. It's about finding the right time to use them and the right modality for them. Because actually, these are really good examples of where you can free up some space of those really critical people who keep your business running, to allow them to do the high trusted transactions that you're typically having the voice or face to face. So it's not about diminishing the value, it's about recognizing the place for those interactions, for those transactional interactions that can be deflected into an automated way. And that is absolutely where, digital channels in a typically mobile modality really, really helps. So just in summary, I hope, just to finish off, what I've tried to talk about is that consumerization of work. I think public sector particularly is in a really interesting space, because the vast majority of the people who work in your environment are also your own customers as well. So by being really conscious of the employee engagement and how we provide a connected experience, communication and collaboration platform for employees on the right-hand side of the brain, and then think about that communication experience on the left-hand side of the brain, which is focused on your customers, the people you're delivering service to. The trick is to try to fuse those two halves of the brain together, to try to find one simple platform to allow you to bring those two bits together to drive better efficiencies and ultimately drive better service out to your employees and your citizens. With that, just wanted to draw an end. If there's any questions, I'll be happy to answer them. Please pop them in the comments thread. I do have my details as well on the landing page, so if anybody would like to contact me, please do. I'll leave it open for a few more seconds just in case there's any questions. No, I don't think so. So Mark, why don't I pass back to you with my thanks, and thank you all for listening.